we are going to go over the review of the final of last spring. I'm going to start with with a question that wasn't in the final, but I think it's helpful for any game theory questions that you could have. So, what is a Nash equilibrium? A Nash equilibrium is a situation in which either player chooses the best possible strategy given what the other one chose, okay? So when you face this type of payoff matrix, why is this called a payoff matrix? Because what is in here are the payoffs of choosing each strategy for each player, okay? So when you face these type of questions, I think that the best way to tackle this type of question to find a Nash equilibrium is the following. You start thinking about what is the best thing that, let's say, player 1 on the rows can do given what player 2 does. In this case, what is the best thing that Naomi can do given what Fred does? So you say, okay, if Fred plays football, Naomi has two possibilities, or playing or choosing, in this case, football, and getting 4 points, or choosing going to a movie and getting 2 points. What is the best thing that she can do if Fred chooses football? Football. Why? Because 4 is higher than 2. So what I do is that I highlight that payoff, okay? And my highlighting trick always works, and is a good way to find the answer easily. So then again, now, Fred's strategy is choosing a movie. So what is the best thing that Naomi can do? Football. Now, from Fred's perspective, if Naomi chooses football, Fred has between football and movie, football will give him 5, movie will give him 1. What is the best thing that he can do? Football. Okay. Now, if she chooses a movie, he has between football giving him 4 points or movie giving him 1 point. The best thing that he can do is football. So what is the Nash equilibrium here? Where you find when the payoffs of both of the players are underlined. So the Nash equilibrium is football, football, okay? Here. So we are going to put here football. Believe me, I've seen many people taking these exams, and when I see the students that do the underlying thing, they are usually the ones that have the correct answer. So bring a color pen, or make sure, or you can round it however you want, but just this is a good strategy. Now, another example. From Naomi's point of view, if Fred chooses football, what is the best thing that she can do? Football, because 5 is higher than 1, okay? The payoff of choosing this strategy is higher than the payoff of choosing this strategy, football. Now, if Fred chooses movie, what is the best thing that she can do? Movie too, okay. So, now, from Fred's point of view, if Naomi chooses football, what is the best thing that he can do? Football. And if Naomi chooses a movie, what is the best thing that he can do? Choosing a movie. So in this case, and that can happen, you have 2 possible Nash equilibriums. The point here is that they both have to choose the same thing, okay? But you can have situations, don't get stressed if you have a situation, if you have a situation in which you have 2 Nash equilibriums. That's a possibility. If you did the analysis right, you get these 2 cases in which 2 payoffs are highlighted, then you're fine. Or underlined, then you're fine. Okay? Good? Clear? Okay. So the answer is, for the first case, football, football, they both choose. And for the second case, football, football, or movie, movie, okay? That is the set of strategies that they choose. So this is the type of answer. Football, football, set of strategies. Movie, movie, set of strategies. Okay? Clear? Good. Next question. Okay. Now we're going to talk about opportunity cost and trade. So this question says the following. I have Grace and Hugo, and I have the amount of writing pages that Grace can do or Hugo can do in one day versus the amount of typing pages that Grace can do and Hugo can do in one day. So the way and the question here is like, which of the following will be a mutually agreeable rate of exchange? So what we have to think about this here is, okay, first of all, I have to calculate the opportunity cost of these people because the rate of exchange is going to be based on how expensive it is for each one of them to produce each one of the things. And based on that, they are going to say like, oh, okay, because this is more efficient for me to produce, maybe I will exchange it with this person given how expensive it is for this person to produce X or either to produce the writing pages or the typing pages. So let's do the opportunity cost here. So it says here, 4, 24, 8, 8. So basically, this thing says that writing pages, typing pages, writing pages, typing pages. And what we have here, if we follow this information, is that these are basically the lines of exchange between one another for each person. For Grace, the opportunity cost of writing a page in terms of typing pages is 24 over 4, which is equal to 6, right? So Grace has to give up 6 typing pages to get 1 written page, right? Okay. And then we know that the opportunity cost of the other good is the opposite. So the opportunity cost of 1 type page in terms of written pages is 1/6, okay? Now, the opportunity cost of Hugo of writing a page is what? He has to give up 1 and 1. Great. Because why? Because he has to give up 8 typing pages to get 8 of 8 written pages. So it's 1 and 1, okay? So what we see here is that who is more efficient at producing what? How do we see the efficiency? Compare the opportunity cost. So we see here that for Grace, it's more efficient to type because it costs her only 1/6 of written pages. Whereas for Hugo, it costs 1 on 1, okay? So Grace will be better if she types an exchange for written pages, right? Okay. So having said that, we have the following here. Which of the following will be mutually agreeable? So she's going to exchange as long as it's cheaper for her than giving up these 6, right? So A, Grace trades 1 written page to Hugo for 1 type page. Well, that's not a good business for Hugo because he does the same if he does it by himself, right? So this one is not an agreeable case. Grace trades 3 written pages to Hugo for 1 type page. How does that look? No, because it is more expensive for Grace, right? Okay. C, Grace trades 3 type pages to Hugo for 1 written page. Yeah, that sounds good, right? Okay. Or Grace trades 7 type pages to Hugo for 1 written page. No, because this is more expensive, right, than the 6. So the answer is C, okay? So here you don't have to like calculate the exact rate of exchange, just see what is a good business for them, given how costly it is to produce each one of the goods. Okay, the next question. Yes? Yes?
Yes, I don't know why question number 1 is C in this case.
Question number 1 is C? Okay, because A is not the case, because if they trade 1 to 1, is the same for Hugo to just produce that by himself, right? If Grace trade is what is better for, okay, Grace had, okay, so for Grace to get 1 written page, she has to give up 6 type pages, right? So this says here, and to get 1 type page, she has to give up only 1/6 of a written page. So Grace trades 3 written pages to Hugo for 1 type page. This is not a good business for her, right? So then the next one is Grace trades 3 type pages to Hugo for 1 written page. That is cheaper than her opportunity cost, okay? And then Grace trades 7 type pages to Hugo for 1 written page. That is more expensive than if she produces it, right? Because here the cost of 1 written page is only 6 type pages for her. So the best thing that they could do among all these options is C, okay? Good. Is that clear for everyone? Okay. Now, suppose this figure shows the market demand for hot dogs. Suppose the price of hamburger, which is a substitute good for a hot dog, increases. Which of the following changes will occur? Okay, first of all, when we only observe movements along the demand curve, when the price of the good changes, okay? So we are talking about the market for hot dogs. So if they were telling me something about the price of hot dogs, we will see this move or a move here. But that's not the case, okay? So they are telling me that there is a change in something else. When the change is in something else, I usually observe shifts on the demand function. What can be that something else? It can be preferences, it can be income, it can be expectations, or it can be the price of other goods, relative goods, either complements or substitutes. In this case, it's the price of a substitute good. So what happens? If the price of the hamburger increases, that means that the substitute good is more expensive. So what am I going to do with hot dogs? The demand goes up. So the demand shifts from D2 to D1, okay? And the answer here is D, a shift from D2 to D1, okay? So the first thing to think, the first thought that you should have when you see this type of question is, okay, the price of the good is not changing. Is the price of something, is something else what is changing? So it has to be a shift of the demand function, okay? Good. Answer is D. Now, next question. The diagram pertains to the demand for turkey in the United States. All else equal, an increase in the income of buyers who consider turkey to be an inferior good would cause a move from. So what happens here? What is an inferior good? is when income increases, the demand goes down, okay? But here, what are we talking about here? Income, not prices. So what is going to happen? The demand is going to change, right? So what we have here is that the demand moves from DA to DB, because an inferior good is a good that you don't want to consume when your income increases. So they are saying that the income of these buyers who consider turkey an inferior good will go up, so you will move from here to here. The answer is A. Okay? Clear? Again, the key thing to have in mind here is that what is changing is not the price of the good, it's something else, in this case, the income, okay? And what is the relationship of income and demand in this case? Because if it is an inferior good, the relationship is negative, okay? Next question. Okay. Refer to this table. Cost. Given the price in a purely competitive market, what happens in a purely competitive market? Profits equal 0, okay? The price is 1,500 per unit, and the total fixed cost and total variable cost schedule presented here. What is the maximum profit of this firm? So what is the answer? 0. You don't really have, they give you all these numbers and all this table, but what they want you to have is the concept very clear. In a purely competitive market, the maximum profit is 0, okay? So the answer is A. Oops, okay. Good. So here, suppose company A's railroad cars pass through farmers B's cornfields. The railroad causes an externality to the farmer because the railroad cars emit sparks that cause 1,500 in damage to the farmer's crops. Okay, so we have to take this number into account, right? Cost to the farmer is 1,500 in damage. There is a special soy-based grease that the railroad could purchase that would eliminate the damage in sparks. The grease cost 1,200. Basically, this is the elimination cost. Okay? Suppose that the farmer has the right to compensation for any damage that his crops suffer. Assume that there are no transaction costs. Which of the following characterizes the efficient outcome? Okay. So what is the important information here for an efficient outcome? We have basically the cost of the farmer, the cost of elimination, and the fact that the farmer has the rights. If the farmer has the rights, that means that he says, I'm sorry, there are no cars passing through this railroad because this is going to cost me 1,500. Unless you pay me those 1,500, you can't pass the cars. Well, then what is efficient? To compare paying 1,500 to the farmer or paying for the elimination cost. Basically buying that soy-based grease to eliminate those sparks. So what is the most efficient thing to do? Given that the farmer has the right, elimination, because 1,200 is cheaper than 1,500. So the answer is B, right? The railroad would purchase the grease for 1,200 and pay the farmer nothing because no crops damage will occur. Okay? Clear? For those type of questions where there is a story, usually look for the key information pieces, okay? In that case where cost, elimination cost, and who has the rights, okay? Okay. Here. Refer to the figure, consumer. Suppose that a consumer is originally at point R, here, then the price of good X decreases. Which of the following represents the substitution effect of the price decrease? Well, first of all, where do you see substitution effects? The substitution effects happen along these preference curves, okay? And the income effect happens between the preference curves, right? Because when you have more income, you are able to get to a higher utility point, which is another one of these, okay? So the substitution effect of the price is going to be that this person, given that the good X, the price of the good X decreases, that means that this person is going to be able, with the same income, to consume more of the good X because it's cheaper than of the good Y, but having the same utility level. So the substitution effect is that this person moves from R to T. Is that clear? Okay. Yes?
Just repeat when the change happens along the curve.
Changes here are showing you substitution effect, okay? Because this is just telling how, given the preference of this individual, he or she substitutes between one good and another, okay? And then the move of this, the shift of these curves up or down is showing, okay, if I can afford more, then I will have more utility and I will consume more quantities, okay? The farther you move up, the more quantities you consume of both goods. If there are changes in prices, then your preferences are saying, well, how do I substitute between one good and another given my preferences, okay? So this is what I observe along the curve. Is that clear for everyone? Good. Okay. So answer is B, the movement from point R to point T, a movement along the curve, okay? If the federal government placed a 60-cent excise tax on cigarettes to finance health insurance for those with pre-existing conditions, let me start drawing this. So this is my market for cigarettes, right? And this is the equilibrium price of cigarettes. They are telling me that the government places a tax of 60 cents to finance health, and then as a result, the price of a pack of cigarettes goes up by 30 cents. So this is telling me basically that this is going to happen to the price. It's going to go up by 30 cents, right? But the tax is 60 cents. So what does that mean? That from the equilibrium price up, the consumers are going to pay 30 cents, and the producers have to pay the rest of the tax, the other 30 cents, right? Because who's going to pay for the rest of the tax? So you know that this is other 30 cents, and here it will be 60, okay? So the answer will be that they both pay the same, right? Because if the price goes up from the equilibrium 30 cents, that means the consumers are paying those 30 cents. Someone else has to pay those other 30. Who is that someone else? The producer. So there you go. The incident tax will fall. The profits of cigarette. The burden of tax will be shared equally by producers and consumers. The answer is D. Okay? Good.
Would there be a case where producers would have to pay more of the tax than consumers?
Yes, if, for example, in this case, they tell me that the price went up 20 cents, then who's going to pay the rest? The producers, okay? Because what happens with a tax is that the burden of the tax gets shared between producers and consumers depending on the characteristics of the demand function and the supply function. We learn what the share is, either more for producers or more for consumers. In this case, when they tell me basically half is paid by consumers, the other half has to be paid by producers. Louder?
It says afterwards that as a result of the tax, the price of the pack of cigarettes went up 30 cents. So it went up 90 cents in total, didn't it?
No. No. The market was, he was asking that if the price is going up 30 cents, isn't it that it's going up 90 cents in total? No. They are saying, how does a tax work? You have your supply and your demand function. You have a tax that shifts the demand function down 60, basically, like this, right? Okay, this is 60. Then you find the quantities. You look for the price associated to those quantities, and this is the tax that is paid by them, right? Okay. So what happens here is that they are telling me the government is imposing a tax of 60, and what you observe at the end is that the price goes from the equilibrium price up 30 cents after they impose the tax, right? So then if you see that the price went up 30 cents, that means that the consumers are paying those 30 cents because it goes up from here to here, because they are not saying anything about characteristics of the market, so you assume that is a competitive market, and then someone else has to pay the rest, and that someone else are the producers, okay? It's not that they are saying, no, yeah, that's the answer, okay? Good. Now, 8. Vilma's cat causes Ben to sneeze. Vilma values her cat companionship by 500 per year. Okay? This is Vilma's value. And the cost to Ben of tissues and his allergy medication is $750 per year. Based on the cost theorem, what could happen? What? Vilma should pay Ben $750 for tissues and allergy medication? So, what do we have to know here? The cost theorem is that given that if there are no transaction costs and when the property rights are well defined, you should arrive to the efficient outcome by negotiation, basically. Like, this is like in my own words. So what is happening here? It seems that Vilma has the right to have a cat, right? And if Vilma has a cat, Ben will have to deal with his allergies, right? So what happens? It is more expensive for Ben to have the allergies than to pay Vilma the value the amount that she values the cat, right? And she has the right to have the cat because it doesn't say otherwise. So what is going to happen? He has to pay Vilma something a little bit over her valuation, so she's like, okay, I'm not going to have my cat. What is the best thing that he could do? Pay $550 She gets rid of the cat, and that's cheaper for him than spending $750 on tissues and medication. Okay? Yes? Can you be loud? The fact that they say
For cat companionship at 500 per year make a difference? He would have to pay her more, maybe? Because he's only paying her once.
oh, I mean, this is like basically what happens in a year. Yeah, like, so in a year he has to spend 750, and in a year she values her cat 500. So he has to give her something that doesn't make her indifferent. If he offers her 500, she's like, no, I'd rather have my cat. It's the same. If he offers her 501, she's still better getting the money, right? So the option here is 550, so then she's better, right? But this could be 501, 500.01, and Vilma is still better getting this money than having her cat, okay? So answer was D. You pass it. Answer was D. Good. Now, pollution reduction. This is a very easy question, but was one of the trickiest last year, and a lot of people got confused. Why? Because in most of these questions, what you have, okay, let's read the question. The following table shows the total cost for each of the four firms, firm A, B, C, and D, to eliminate units of pollution from their production processes. For example, firm A, to eliminate 1 unit of pollution, cost $46. And for firm A to eliminate 2 units, it cost 103. Okay. So then it says if the government charged a fee of 85 per unit of pollution, how many units of pollution would the firms eliminate altogether? So how do you make this calculation? Excellent. So the firm will pay the government 85 instead of assuming the cost of eliminating the unit when the marginal cost of eliminating a unit is higher than 85. If the marginal cost of eliminating a unit is lower than 85, they rather eliminate the unit than pay for the pollution cost. But what we have here is not marginal cost, it's total cost. So you have to calculate marginal cost, compare it to the 85, and then find your answer. So let's make that calculation fast here. Let's start for the last units because these are bigger. So here basically is firm D going from the 3rd unit to the 4th unit. So the 4th unit costs $97, right? Here for firm C, 89, 90, 102, 77, 73, 71, 80. You don't need to calculate the rest because, in these cases it's very obvious. So what happens here? How many units they will eliminate altogether? Excellent. Why? Because they rather eliminate this first unit, okay? Firm A rather eliminate this first unit that costs 46 than pay $85. Same thing for all of these up to here, right? So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 units, okay? Clear? Question? How do I get these numbers? Does anyone know how do I get these numbers? What is the marginal cost of producing the 4th unit for firm D? The difference between producing 3 units and producing 4 units, right? The marginal cost is the cost of the extra unit, okay? So the cost of the extra unit here is 97. The difference between 188 and 285. Is that clear for everyone? it could be in this case or it could be in other cases, the marginal cost is the cost of the extra production, the extra unit, okay? Mm. 10. Alice owns a pumpkin patch. One spring day, Alice spent 12 hours planting $300 worth of seeds in her pumpkin patch. She expects that seeds planted will yield $800 worth of pumpkins. Alice is also an avid golfer and provides golf lessons at the local club, and she charges $40 per hour of her golf lessons. An economist would calculate Alice's cost and her pumpkin patch, Alice's total cost and of her pumpkin patch to equal. Okay, how do we do this? What is the total cost? What is this question about? Total cost has two things, explicit cost and implicit cost, right? And you have also two components, economic cost and accounting cost. The economic cost usually includes implicit cost and explicit cost, and the accounting cost only includes explicit cost, okay? So let me write that down. Explicit cost plus implicit cost is equal to total cost or equal to economic cost. Implicit cost, total cost of economic cost, implicit cost is equal to also your opportunity cost or accounting cost. Okay? So what do we have here? The explicit cost and the implicit cost will be what? What will be the explicit cost? 300. What will be the implicit cost? The fact that she is not teaching golf, but is spending the 12 hours planting those seeds, right? It's her time, she's using it in that, but she's giving up her golf classes, right? That is the opportunity cost. But you have to give up to get something. So she's giving up $40 times 12 to be able to plant those pumpkins, okay? So her implicit cost will be 300 plus 12 times 40 will be equal to 780, right? Okay, and that is the total cost. And the accounting profit, because that is another thing that appears here, will be what? Just her revenue minus her explicit cost, right? Because that is accounting, what you can actually see. Economic cost includes the implicit cost. Oh, I made a mistake here. Is explicit cost has to do with accounting profits. Okay? Yeah. And implicit cost have something to do with economic cost. Okay? So my accounting profit will be 800, which is her revenue, minus 300, which is her cost, the cost of the seeds, and that will be equal to 500. So the answer will be 780, which is the total cost that includes explicit cost and implicit cost, and her accounting profit, that will be 500. Yes, can you move? Okay, any questions? Yes. How do you know?
To multiply 12 hours by $40 per hour of the golf.
Okay, because when they are talking about total cost, they are talking about explicit cost and implicit cost, right? So they are giving you the information about the hours of golf lessons, the price of an hour of golf lesson, to tell you, well, she's spending 12 hours of her possible work, 12 hours that she could have spent teaching golf, making $40 an hour, and instead of doing that, she is planting the seeds, right? So she is giving up $40 per hour by being in her farm and planting her seeds. So that is like her implicit cost, right? She's not making that money, but she's giving it up, basically, okay? So that is how I know that this is my implicit cost. It's the opportunity cost of working in planting the pumpkin seeds, okay? Clear? Good. Okay. This question. Okay. From your book, you should know this graph, okay? This is the graph of the cost. Marginal cost has this shape. Average total cost and average variable cost have a U-shape where the minimum of each one of those intercepts the marginal cost. And the average fixed cost is a decreasing function, right? Why is it decreasing? Because it's fixed, and you start dividing it every time by more quantities, right? So here, what can you see? Look. When average total cost, let's put colors here so it's easier to see. Okay. When average total cost is decreasing, average total cost is higher than marginal cost, right? So in this part, average total cost is higher than marginal cost, decreasing average total cost, okay? Now, when average total cost is increasing, marginal cost is higher than average total cost. So I think there is a table in the book where they show all these relationships. You should take a look into that. I don't have the number of the page in my mind, but I remember that when I was teaching this class, I always pointed the students to that table. So which of the following is always true? Well, then we have to look for basically this relationship. When marginal costs are greater than average total cost will be increasing. That's the case here. Marginal cost greater than average total cost, and average total cost is increasing, okay? Increasing, right? So that's the answer. Let's look at the other ones. When marginal costs are less than average total cost, which is this case, average total cost will be increasing. No, we show that it is decreasing, okay? when average fixed costs are falling, marginal cost must be less than average fixed cost. There is no way marginal cost will be average fixed costs are always falling because it's a fixed quantity that is divided for more and more, a fixed cost, that is divided for more and more quantities all the time. So average fixed cost is always decreasing. And when marginal costs are increasing, average total cost will also be increasing. Not necessarily because marginal costs start increasing here and average total cost start increasing here. So in this part, marginal cost, average total cost, is decreasing instead of increasing. So the answer is A. Is everyone with me? This seems fast, but you just have to basically memorize and learn the relationships between these. Just go ahead and look at this table and look at this graph in your book, and you will be able to analyze the relationships better. Question 12. Oh, this has the wrong options. Yeah. It's okay. Don't just remove the options there and I'll give them the answer. Thank you. Of the tax, okay, so here, the vertical distance between A and C represents the tax in this market. Refer to this figure and what is the amount of the deadweight loss as a result of the tax. So what is the deadweight loss? Is this triangle here, right? So that is 800 minus 300, which is the amount of the tax, times the change in quantities given the tax, which is the difference between 40 and 20, which is 20, change in quantities, okay, divided by 2, because that is the formula for the area of a triangle. So in this case, let's use the black so it's easier to see, is the difference between 800 and 300, right, times the difference in the change in quantities. This is the tax. The change in quantities, which is 20 divided by 2. This will be equal to 500 times 20 divided by 2, and that will be equal to 5,000. Okay? So that's the answer to this question. Yeah. Your professors should have uploaded or will upload the questions of today, so you will have like the options here, but this is the way you calculate that deadweight loss, okay? Oops. Another question about accounting profits and cost. Catherine gives piano lessons for $15 an hour. She also grows flower, which she arranges and sells at the local farmer's market. One day she spends 5 hours planting $50 worth of seeds in her garden. Once her seeds have grown into flowers, she can sell them for $150. That will be her revenue at the farmer's market. Catherine's accounting profits are. So what is Catherine accounting profits? They are giving me the information for the implicit cost, but I don't need it because accounting profits is only the explicit cost and the revenue. So the difference between these two is 100, right? The Catherine's accounting profits are, okay, but here they make it tricky because they ask you for the accounting profits in the question and they give you the answers where they make you calculate the economics profits too. So this will be the accounting profits, but you have to subtract the implicit cost, right? So that is 15 times 5 hours, right? Again, you asked this question before. How do I know that I have to calculate the hours times the price? Well, because she is giving up $15 per hour when she does the flower arrangements, right? So it will be 100 minus 15 times 5. That is equal to 25. So the answer, wait. The answer is B. Yes. Her accounting profits are 100 and her economic profits are 25 because she has to subtract the fact that she's giving up the piano lessons by doing the flower arrangements. Good. Okay. After economics class one day, your friends suggest that taxing food would be a good way to raise revenue because the demand for food is quite inelastic. Which of the following statements is correct? Okay. First of all, what does it mean that the demand is inelastic? Louder, please. Okay. It means that the consumers are not that responsive to the change in prices. Why? Because in this case, they have to consume food, so even if food is more expensive, they still have to have their meals a day, okay? So, when a demand curve is inelastic, that means that they are not that the market is not that sensitive to the change in prices. That means that the deadweight loss is going to be what? Smaller, right? Because the change in quantities is not going to be that big given the change in prices, right? Because the deadweight loss is just showing you how much the market is going to be affected given the change in prices or given the tax in this case. So, having said that, an inelastic demand function leads to a little deadweight loss. So, because people are not very sensitive. Okay, so let's look at the possibilities here. A tax on food leads to relatively little deadweight loss because people are not sensitive to the price in this market. So this one seems to be a right answer. Okay. B, a tax on food leads to relatively large deadweight loss. No. A tax on food leads to relatively little deadweight loss because people are very sensitive. No, this is like is little deadweight loss but not because they are very sensitive. A tax on food leads to relatively large deadweight loss. Again, no. So the answer is A. Okay? Yes.
If it was elastic, would it have been a large deadweight? And people are very sensitive?
Because they are very sensitive. Either elastic. I think that our right question should say the demand is very elastic, right? Because then you can like sort of have an idea of more sensitivity. But yeah. Okay. So this question. we see here? In this market, they are asking me about externalities. And they are giving me a table with private cost and private value and social value, right? We can see that social value is higher than private value for all the quantities, right? That means that there is a positive externality. Somehow in this market, the production and the consumption of this good generates, or the production of these goods generates a higher social value, right? That is a positive externality, okay? Because the social value here is higher than the private value here. So, what we have to do in a regular market is to find the case in which private cost is equal to the social value, or price equal to cost, right? Which is, or demand equal to supply, which is basically, you have to find the point in which these two are equals. And what is that point? That point is this one, okay? So there is a positive externality because social value is higher than private value, and the socially optimal equilibrium is 4 units. Yes?
Can you repeat that one, please?
Okay, so here we have a market, okay, in which we have basically the private cost here, right? Cost and quantities, and the private value and the social value, right? In a market, you have to compare the cost. If they are not giving you social cost, it's because the private cost is equal to the social cost, right? But they are telling you that there is a private value and a social value. And in the whole market, you have to compare the cost with the social value. So you have to find the equilibrium point between social value and private cost, which will be this, right? The point in which they are equal. Which point are they equal? When private cost is equal to 14 and social value is equal to 14, okay? So that's one thing. But the second thing that they are saying is something about an externality, right? Since social value is higher than private value, it means that there is a positive externality, right? So the answer here is it creates a positive externality. And how do you find the equilibrium? By making those two equal, okay? Remember that equilibrium is making demand and supply equal. What is demand is valuation or willingness to pay. What is supply is cost, right? So you sort of have to make your concepts parallel to the idea here and find the answer. Another question? Yes?
So when social value is greater than private value, means that it's a positive externality?
Yes.
And when like private value is greater than social value, that's negative externality?
Yes, yes. There is some negative externality that is making the society having a lower value for the thing, right? Or another thing is that when private cost is lower than the social cost, if the social cost is higher, then there is also a negative externality because it's more expensive for the society to produce that good, okay? So you can have those two cases. Yes?
When would it be the case that
What will be the case?
when would it be the case when there's no externalities at all?
Oh, just there is no difference between private value and social value. They are the same. That is the case when there are no externalities, yes. Or no difference between private cost and social cost, okay? Because you can see examples with externalities either when they talk about private cost and social cost or private value and social value. When there are differences between those two, you are facing externalities either negative or positive depending on the case, okay? Okay. Okay. Assume that the fast food restaurant market in a small town is characterized by monopolistic competition. One of the McDonald's restaurant reports that its price is higher than its marginal cost, but equal to its average total cost. Which of the following statement is true about the firm? Okay, so first of all, monopolistic competition, we know that is very similar to perfect competition, okay? The characteristics of the long run and the short run are very similar. The only difference is that the firms participating in monopolistic competition have a little bit of price markup, okay? So, what this is saying is that in the long run, this person is saying in the price is higher than the marginal cost. That is showing that they have a little bit of a price premium because they are monopolistic competition, but the price is equal to the average total cost. What happens in the long run? Your price has to be equal to the average total cost because you have to be able to cover all your costs, the fixed cost and the variable cost in the long run. In the short run, you can be covering only the variable cost, right? But in the long run, you have to be covering the whole cost, okay? So, the answer here is A. The restaurant is possibly maximizing profits and is in long run equilibrium. Why is not B? The restaurant is possibly maximizing profits and is in the short run equilibrium. Because in the short run, this restaurant doesn't need to be to have the price equal to the average total cost. It could be covering only the variable cost, and the restaurant can increase its profit by reducing its output. That's not true. And the new restaurants enter the market. One of the characteristics of monopolistic competition is that it's not that there are some barriers to entry. Okay? So answer is A. Next one. 17. Okay. This question also has a lot of calculations to make. So, a large share of the world supply of diamonds comes from country 1 and 2. Suppose that the marginal cost of mining diamonds is constant and is 2,000 per diamond. And the demand for diamonds is described by the following schedule. So this is the demand for diamonds. The marginal cost is constant and 2,000. That also means that So if it is constant, it means that any extra unit is going to cost $2,000. So basically, the cost of every single unit is $2,000, right? So suppose that country 1 and 2 form a cartel, then what happens? So what happens when they form a cartel? They are going to act as a monopoly. If they are going to act as a monopoly, what they are going to do? They are going to maximize profits, right? So what we have to do here is find the point in which they maximize profits and then calculate what are the quantities that they will produce when they maximize profits and how they are going to split these profits. They are going to split the profits equally because they are a cartel, but we need to know which quantity they are going to produce. So let's make a calculation here for the total revenue, right? For the total cost and for the profits, okay? Oh, let's do it in black so you guys can see. Okay, so here, total revenue, basically total revenue is this one times this one, okay? I'm going to remove the thousands and just put one number here, okay, to make it easier. So it's going to be 9,000, it's going to be 16,000 here, 21,000, 24,000, 25,000, 24,000, 21, and 16,000, okay? What is the total cost? How do I get those numbers? Total revenue is price times quantities, okay? Total revenue, price times quantities. So I am removing the zeros of the K, but this is 9,000, this is 16,000, etc., okay? So we don't lose time writing zeros. Now, what is the total cost? Since the marginal cost is constant, this is the cost of each unit. So the total cost will be quantity 9 times 2,000, right? So 9 times 2 is 18. Yeah. 16, 7, 14, 12, 10, 8. Okay? So then we start making the calculations of the revenue here. It's more expensive to produce the diamonds in this case than to sell the diamonds in this case because there are negative profits here. There are 0 profits here. Here there are 7. Here there are 12, 15, 16, 15, and 12. Okay, so now I have here total revenue minus total cost equal profits. Which one is the case that gives me the highest profits? 16? Okay, so quantity equal 4,000, right? Okay, so profit 16, quantity equal 4,000. In that case, and since they divided in 2 is the countries split the market. Country 1 will produce 2,000 diamonds and earn 8,000, okay? So the point here, when you're talking about a cartel, and most of the questions are very similar, sometimes they give you this, which is requires more work because you have to calculate the profits. Sometimes they give you the profits. So you just have to find the highest profits because the cartel acts like a monopoly, maximizes profits, and then you just divide the quantities and the profit in each one of the participants of the cartel. Okay? Clear? Yes?
Not quite clear. So, because the answer only mentions country 1.
Yes. Because what happens in a cartel is that they split things equally. So this could be, so if the countries split the market evenly, what happens with country 1? Yeah.
Sorry, I was looking at the wrong column.
Okay. Thank you. So this, what I'm doing here is finding first the answer for the cartel, and then I split the quantities and the profits. Okay? Yes?
Produce 2,000 diamonds.
Where are you getting the produce? 2,000? What?
I understand the profit part, but like the produce.
Because the quantities associated with the highest profits are 4,000. So they split it. Okay? Is this clear? Good? Okay, so monopolist or cartel maximizes profits. You find the quantity and price that maximize those profits, and then if it is a cartel, you divide that quantities and profits in 2. Okay? The answer was D. the countries split, if they split evenly, country 1 will produce 2,000 because the whole production is 4,000, so they divide it, and profit will be 8,000 because the whole profit is 16,000, yes. Oh, if they are not mentioned here, you don't need it, yeah, right. And in case there is no variable cost, because they are saying that the marginal cost is constant, so that means that like all the time the cost is the same for each unit. Yeah. Just one thing for any question in this type of class, if they are not giving you some information, is because you don't need it. So if they are not talking about variable cost here, you probably don't need it. If they are not talking about marginal revenue here, for example, which is something that you usually talk in monopoly, maybe you don't need it, so you just maximize the profits, okay? Question 18. Okay, the school system is a township in New Jersey, in a township in New Jersey has virtually unlimited capacity for its residents. It accepts all applicants and operates on both tuition and private donations. Although every resident values an educated community, the school's revenue have suffered lately due to a large decline in private donations from the elderly population. Since the benefit that each citizen receives from having an educated community is a public good, which of the following would not be correct? Okay. The free ride, so in general, what is going to happen here is that they are going to introduce some concept that is related to the fact that you are talking about a public good, or the fact that you are talking about donations, and the benefits of the public good, etc. So the free rider problem is a typical problem in public goods, right? Causes the private market to undersupply education to the community. Yes, like this is basically the definition of the free rider problem. We are talking about a public good that could happen. So that's fine. This is correct. The government can potentially help the market reach a socially optimal level of education. Yes, when we are talking about public goods, the government can do some subsidy or intervene somehow to get to the socially optimal production, okay? Because since we are saying here that that every citizen benefits from it, etc., so there are like differences between private cost and social cost. So the government intervention will be good. So this is correct. C, a tax increase to pay for education could potentially make the community better off. So this is basically, the B is talking about some government intervention could help. And the C is basically giving you a possible government intervention. So this is also correct. The private market is the best way to supply education. This is the wrong answer because what they are talking here is that, okay, this is a public good, everyone benefits from it, etc., etc. So the answer that would not be correct here is to change this into a private market, because then it will be what is a private market is rival and exclusive. So some people won't be able to get education, right? So then no, the whole community will benefit from it, etc., etc. Next one. Okay. In an apartment on a...
Quick question, I'm sorry. The free riders, they will refer like to those that get the free education in this scenario?
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, someone that doesn't contribute somehow. Yes, yeah. Okay, question 19, scenario 2. in an apartment on a college campus, there are two types of residents: faculty and students. Faculty members' salary means they are willing to pay higher for housing than students. The willingness to pay of faculty, there are 60 units. Suppose there are 15 faculty members. 15 faculty members, and their willingness to pay is $3,000 per unit, per month, and there are 45 students, and their willingness to pay is $1,000 per month for rent for 1 unit. Suppose that the cost of the whole building maintenance is $10,000 every month. How much additional profit will the apartment building earn if they are able to perfectly discriminate if they are initially charging everyone $1,000? Okay, so what do you have to do here? First of all, if they are initially charging everyone $1,000, what are the profits? 60,000, right? 60 units times $1,000 minus the cost of the building maintenance, $10,000. That will be equal to 50,000, right? Those are the profits that they make if they charge everyone the same, $1,000. But if they price discriminate, what happens? What is price discrimination? I charge the faculty their willingness to pay, and I charge the students their willingness to pay, right? So that will give me what? That will give me that if I charge the faculty 3,000, I will get 15 times 3,000. And if I charge the students 1,000, I will get 45 times 1,000. This will be equal to 90,000, right? Okay. Okay, 90,000 minus 10,000 in cost, right? Right? Okay, minus 10,000. That is equal to 80,000, right? I don't know if the camera can get to here. Okay, good. So the difference will be how much? 30,000. Okay? So there are, over the years, we have given you many questions like this, in which the calculation is very easy. The trick is that we ask you for the change in profits. So sometimes the students calculate only this, for example. And this is what is called the distractor when you create these multiple choice questions, because this is a distractor. You calculate those profits and you are like, oh, that's 90,000, period. But we are talking about the change. So don't let the distractors distract you, and make the whole calculation, and remember that we are talking about the change, okay? Good. Okay, and the last question: which of the following is not a characteristic of an oligopolistic market structure? A, zero economic profits in the long run. Zero profits is a characteristic of perfect competition, okay? So this is not a characteristic of the oligopolistic market in the structure. So we are done. However, let's look at the other ones. Barriers to entry, that is one of the characteristics of oligopolistic competition. Domination of the industry by a relatively small number of firms, that is what oligopolistic competition is. Oligopoly means like the power in few, in the hands of a few, basically. And D, awareness by individual firms that other firms will react to changes in their price. This is basically what we do when we do the reaction functions, et cetera, in the examples of oligopoly. So the answer is A here. Because remember, zero profits is always associated with perfect competition, okay? Good. So now Daniel is going to do the other half of the...
So question 22 is about monopolistically competitive. There's no 21. So question 22 is about monopolistically competitive markets. And we know that in monopolistically competitive markets, they act very much like competitive markets, except instead of being price takers fully, they're price makers. So they have some ability to control the price in the market. Why? Because their product is not exactly the same as all the other products in the market from other firms. And so there's some difference that gives them the ability to control price. In other words, they face a downwardly sloped demand curve, right? Much like they do in monopolistically competitive market, or a monopoly, a pure monopoly market, right? And so, because they're competing in a market with other firms that have similar products but a little bit different, if a new firm enters the market and has a product that's a little bit different, and maybe some of the people who would have preferred their product prefer the other product, what's going to happen to their demand curve? It's going to shift to the left or to the right? To the left, right? Because there are some people at every price that prefer that other product, okay? So it would shift to the left. So the answer is C. Any questions on that? No? Question 23 talks about a negative externality. What do we know about a market with a negative externality? The private cost in that market doesn't take into account the full cost of producing that good, right? So if the cost in this case is higher than the cost in the private market, then which curve, supply curve 1 or supply curve 2, is going to represent a socially optimal, or taking into account the negative externality level? Supply curve 1 or supply curve 2? 2, right? Because the cost is higher at every quantity, right? Then it is taken into account by supply curve 1. So we just have to look for the quantity which will maximize total surplus. In this case, it will be what? The equilibrium of the socially optimal supply curve and the demand curve. So the answer is what? A. Any questions about that one? If the cost per unit of production is higher, right, then that represents the negative externality. So because supply curve 2 is higher than supply curve 1, we know that it's referring to a negative externality. And so we look for the equilibrium, because the equilibrium will maximize total surplus, and that corresponds to 35.
Supply 1 would be if the market was in equilibrium.
Supply 1 would be if there was no externality, then supply curve 1 would represent both the private and socially optimal levels. But supply curve 2 in this case, because there's a negative externality, represents the socially optimal level of output, which will maximize total surplus.
And if the supply curve was on, if the second supply curve was on the other side, it would be a positive externality.
It would be a positive externality because then the private costs and benefits aren't taking into account the benefits the society gains by producing that good. Okay. This question is probably the hardest, but you have to work it because it involves a cartel where collusion breaks down, right? So let's start from where the cartel will want to operate at. In this scenario, we have that there's no cost of production. So if profit equals total revenue minus total cost, but there's no cost, then profit just equals total revenue, right? So what do we know about a cartel, right? They're going to act like a monopoly and maximize profits, okay? And so if total revenue equals profit, then what would the cartel produce at? It's going to produce here, right? But now collusion breaks down, so we have to ask ourselves the question, there's two wells, there's two firms, and would either of them have an incentive to either decrease production or increase production, okay, beyond the level that what the cartel would have produced, okay? So let's say there's two firms, firm 1 and firm 2, would either have an incentive to decrease the quantity from the optimal level. Well, if they decrease if at first they're both producing 3 and both taking $18 of profit, right? So they would both earn profit because they split it of $18. If they produce less, then what's going to happen? Then they're going to take a lower share. Let's say firm 2 produces 2 and firm 1 produces 2 and firm 2 produces 3. Then they're going to take a smaller share of a smaller total revenue, right? And so no one has incentive to decrease production, right? Does everybody see that? If you decrease production, firm 2 is going to get 2 times 7 or 14, which is less than 18, because they're getting a smaller share of the total revenue, which is smaller. So no one has incentive to decrease production, right? Let's see if anyone has incentive to increase production then. But first, does everyone see why they don't have incentive to decrease production? In other words, firm 2 would earn $14 of profit in this case. And what would firm 1 earn? They would earn, or firm 2 would earn $21. So they will never decrease production, okay? Does that make sense? All right, so let's see if they have incentive to increase production. So if firm 1 produces 4 and firm 2 continues producing just 3, then how much total profit will firm 1 earn? They'll earn 4 times 5 or 20, and firm 2 will earn 3 times 5 or 15. So do they have incentive to go from, does firm 1 have incentive to go from here to here? Yeah, because before they were earning just $18 of profit, and here they could earn $20 of profit. So they do have incentive to go from here to here, right? So let's look at the answers now. So if collusion breaks down, they're no longer going to produce each a quantity of 6 and charge $6, right? Because in that case, neither firm could have any incentive to produce more, right? But since firm 2 does have incentive, firm 1 and firm 2 both do have incentives to produce more, they're going to move down. I already said that they have no incentive to produce less, so it can't be between 7 and 12. So the only thing we have to see is if it's between this or between this, okay? So when is the price $1, okay? That's when they're producing 11 in total. So what is each, so let's say that firm 1 is producing 5 and firm 2 is producing 6. So firm 1's going to get $5, firm 2 is going to get $6. And so you see that both have incentive to move from this part to this part, right? Which implies that neither of them are going to produce at 11 or $1. So we can cross that one off too, and the last one we're left with is between 2 and 5. So this is really an exercise in process of elimination. You have to look and see whether each firm has an incentive to either increase or decrease production, and then look based on that where they'll end up. Okay? Does that make sense?
But we don't know for sure, like how much quantity they're supposed to produce, right?
So what do you mean by supposed to produce?
Like if it's between 2 and 5, like we don't know whether the firm will produce like 4 or the firm will produce 5.
Right. So we know that the price is $5, $4, $3, $2. I showed you that they do have incentive to move from here to here, right? And so that's between $2 and $5, right? And we eliminated all the other options. So you want to work efficiently because there's 40 questions on this exam, and you don't want to get caught up. If you already know that it can't be any of these cases, then you choose the one that's left. Okay? Does that make sense?
I just want to know how you got to fix to be where they are at collision.
Right. So at collusion, they're earning the maximum total revenue from this chart, right? Which, since they have no cost, that's the place where they maximize total profits. And then splitting it, that's where they would, if they split it equally, they would make the most. Okay. Does that make sense? Any questions?
So when we see the keyword conclusion, this means it's operating under cartel.
Right. When they're in collusion, they're operating as a cartel, they're sharing profits, they're making decisions together, and so they'll want to go to where they can maximize their revenue and then split it. Okay? But since collusion's broken down, that's when we have to see what they'll do instead. Okay? Does that make sense? Any other questions? Okay. So the answer was C. So for 25, we're looking at a budget constraint. Now, what's a budget constraint? A budget constraint is how much income I'm earning and the possible combinations of goods that I can purchase with that money that I'm earning, right? So this is the amount I have to spend on this budget curve, right? And so all of these points are possible points for me to be on. How about this point? Is this a possible point for me? Yes, it is a possible point for me to purchase, but since it says that she spends her entire paycheck on books and CDs, this is not a place where she's going to end up, right? It's possible, but because she spends all of her money on either books or CDs, she'll never be purchasing at point A, right? So let's look at the options now to see what we're doing here. So A says Bayou would not choose A, cannot afford E. So E, how about point E? E is outside of her budget constraint, which means she doesn't have enough income to purchase that many books and CDs, right? So E is outside of her budget constraint. So this part's true. She wouldn't choose A. She cannot afford E. And now we just need to know if this part's right. Will she choose between B, C, or D, depending on her preferences, right? And let's say that, so let's draw some indifference curves and see if she can end up on those points. Well, what if her indifference curve looks like this, right? She could end up at a place where she only purchases CDs and purchases 0 books, okay? An indifference curve could also look like this, depending on her preferences. So this is indifference curve 1, this is indifference curve 2, and her preferences could also look something like this, right? So that would be, each of these could be tangent to an indifference curve. Obviously, all these indifference curves are based on her preferences, right? So all of these are possible points for her to be at, right? So, so she might choose B, C, or D, depending on her preferences. Luckily, that was A, and we started there, so that's the correct answer. If we look down, B is Bayu would not choose E. She wouldn't choose E because she can't choose E. She cannot afford A. She obviously can afford A because it falls within her budget constraint, right? And the other stuff doesn't matter because both of those are wrong. Bayu would not choose A, cannot afford E, and is indifferent between B, C, and D. Well, we don't know if she's indifferent between B, C, and D. Her indifference curve could conceivably look like this, in which case she would be indifferent between B, C, and D, but we don't know that's the case. So A is still the better answer. And the same thing for D, where they're talking about indifference. So we don't know that she's indifferent between those 2 points, so those can't be possible answers. Any questions about that?
Explain A again, why she would not choose A?
Why she would not choose A, because she spends all of her budget, right? She spends all of her budget on books or CDs, right? So she's always going to operate at her budget constraint, right? This budget line represents how many books I have to trade for to get 1 CD, right? On my line of income, right? So that's the maximum amount she could purchase of books or CDs. And so she won't go to A because she would prefer to have more books or CDs, right? In these indifference problems, more is always better, or almost always better, and so you'll never want to go below what you can afford, okay? So the answer is A. All right, so this is a trade question, and we want to know what, if the government allows free trade and the world price is 40, whether there will be imports, exports, and how much imports or exports. So how do we do that? These questions are very simple because we have the world price. We just plug it into the demand curve, plug it into the supply curve, and then exports will equal quantity supplied minus quantity demanded, because if the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, then they're going to export some of the stuff that they couldn't sell to the consumers within the country. And imports would obviously be the reverse, quantity demanded minus quantity supplied, because if quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, it means we need to import some from outside our country, right? So we just plug in to find quantity supplied and quantity demanded. So we do 40, the world price, equals 50 minus 0.5 Q. So we can move this to this side and this to this side. We get 0.5 Q equals 10. This is for quantity demanded. And we get QD equals 20. Does everyone see how I got there? Okay. And then for quantity supplied, we can take 40 equals 5 plus Q. So QS will equal 35. Let's go to our exports equation. We have quantity supplied equals 35 minus 20 equals 15. If this had been a negative number, then we know, of course, that we would be importing, not exporting, right? So we have that exports will be 15 messenger bags. Any questions about that one? Questions? So for 27, we have a competitive firm and a profit maximizing firm in a perfectly competitive market is currently producing 200 units of output. Its average revenue is $6, its average total cost is $7, and its fixed cost is $800, okay? If all the firms in the market are identical, then in the long run one would expect, so let's like try to analyze this market graphically, okay? And we have all these costs. And also, let's think of an equation that relates these things. So we know that total cost equals what plus what? Fixed costs plus variable costs, right? And we have here average revenue and average total cost. So to get to average total cost, you just divide this by Q, right? So you get average total cost equals average fixed cost plus average variable cost. And we know that fixed costs are 800, okay? So average fixed costs are going to be 800 divided by the output. So that's 800 divided by 200, or 4, plus average variable cost equals average total cost of 7. Okay, so this is going to be 7 equals 4 plus average variable cost. So average variable cost is going to equal 3. Okay. Now let's draw the cost curve graph. So we have, we can put average variable cost on here, average total cost, average fixed cost, and price. We know that the average fixed cost will always be doing what as we expand quantity? Decreasing, right? Because as fixed costs are fixed, as we increase quantity, we divide by a bigger and bigger number. So average fixed costs are going to decline. Okay. We're going to have, let's look at a market where marginal costs rise. We have average variable costs rising then too. And we have average total cost that's going to start high, fall, and then marginal cost will pass through the minimum of average total cost. We have the price in this case is going to be $6. And we know that firms will always operate where? Where their marginal cost meets the price, right? Or where their marginal revenue equals, because price is another way of saying marginal revenue, right? Equals, in a competitive market, the price will be, there'll be price takers, so it will be always the same. And so they're going to operate here at a point that is below their average total cost, which implies what? What will be happening here? They'll be taking a loss or a profit here. A loss because profits equal total revenue minus total cost, which if we divide by Q, we get average revenue minus average cost. If we divide and multiply by Q, we get average revenue minus average cost times Q, okay? Or we get 6 minus 7, which is a negative number, times Q for their profits, okay? And so we know they're operating at a loss. What do we know about markets where firms are operating at a loss? What will start to happen? Some firms will exit the market, right? In the long run, firms can't operate at a loss forever, right? So some firms have to exit the market. What happens as firms exit the market? There's less total quantity produced in the market, so what happens to the price? The price increases, right? And the price increases until we get to a point where there are zero economic profits, okay? And so the price will increase. What will happen to output for the individual firms that are still in the market? Because the price increased, they'll produce more or less? More, right? So each firm individually will produce more. The market as a whole will produce less. We know that because the price has to rise. And so let's look at the answers. So the number of the firms in the market will decrease because they can't all operate at a loss the whole time, so some will exit. The individual quantity will increase, so each firm's quantity will increase because the price is rising, because the market quantity will decrease. Okay. So this is a very this is a multi-part question with a lot of parts. You have to be aware that you don't have to draw this curve. If you know that they're operating at a loss, you know that firms can't operate at a loss forever, so some firms have to get out, right? The price will rise, and the individual quantity will increase because the price rises, and the market quantity will decrease as firms exit. Any questions about that? So the key is to look for whether they're earning a profit or a loss. When firms are earning a loss or getting a loss, then then some firms will exit over the long run, and the individual firms that are still in the market will increase their production because the price will rise. What's the shutdown condition, though? When will firms shut down?
When the average variable cost is equal to the marginal cost?
When the average variable cost is actually lower than the price, or higher than, when the average variable cost is higher than the price, then they should shut down, right? Because what they're earning is less than even their cost of production, right? They always have to keep their fixed costs because that's the fixed cost of production, but they'll shut down if the price ever falls below the average variable cost. Okay. So the answer is C. This is again refers to monopolistic competition. We see that in all the answers. We know that, again, that monopolistically competitive firms face a downwardly sloped demand curve. Since they face a downwardly sloped demand curve, they have some choice about what the price will be, right? So they're like competitive firms in that they don't have total control over the price, because sometimes firms will enter or exit and will slide this demand curve, right? But they do have some decision once the number of firms in the market are fixed on the position of that demand they do have some decision to make about the price, okay? So let's look at these answers. So monopolistic competition is similar to perfect competition because both market structures are characterized by differentiated products. Well, in perfect competition, what do we know about the products? They're all exactly the same, so that can't be the right answer. Monopolistic competition is similar to oligopoly because both market structures are characterized by strategic interaction between firms in the market. Well, in monopolistic competition, there are still many firms, okay? So they're not going to be strategic with each firm in the market because there's no way to coordinate. So that's also wrong. C is monopolistic competition is similar to monopoly because both market structures are characterized by firms being price makers rather than price takers. This is true. They are price makers because they can decide on the quantity to produce and then increase the price to correspond with the demand curve. And they're not price takers, so this one's the correct answer. Okay, so this one, do you want me to go back? Question? Question?
No, it's fine.
Are you sure? Oh, it was C.
Yes, thank you.
So this next question, we have to, looks like this graph didn't copy perfectly well. Let me. So the interest rate in this case decreases from 10 to 5%. We have consumption when you're old and consumption when you're young. So what do we know about an interest rate? If we put money in the bank, then it earns an interest rate. And so the money we put in the bank, we can spend when we're older, right? So tomorrow I'm older, right? So tomorrow is consumption when I'm old, and today is consumption when I'm young, right? Okay, so the money I put in the bank, it earns an interest rate. The higher the interest rate, how expensive are products when I'm old relative to when I'm young, right? So if the interest rate increases, then consumption when I'm old becomes cheaper or more expensive relative to when I'm young. Becomes cheaper, right? Because the interest rate is rising, so I can forego consumption today to get more consumption tomorrow, right? If the interest rate falls, obviously the opposite will happen, right? If the interest rate falls, I'll be earning less for every day that I have my money in my bank account, and so the consumption when I'm old will rise relative to the old interest rate, okay? So when it says the interest rate decreases from 10 to 5%, we look at these two budget constraints. These are budget constraints because they're the trade-off between consumption when I'm old and consumption when I'm young. When the price increases, are we moving from the red curve to the blue curve or the blue curve to the red curve? The blue curve to the red curve. Remember, the consumption when I'm old is price is going up because it's moving from 10 to 5. So the blue curve is going to shift down to become the red curve, okay? And then, so Ray's optimal choice moves from, this is his indifference curve that falls on the blue curve. This is his indifference curve that falls on the red curve. So his choice is going to move from B to A, okay? And then we have to see when he moves from B to A, does consumption when he's young go up or go down? Will it go up or go down? It goes down. This implies that the income effect is greater than the substitution effect. Because normally if the price of another good goes up, right, then I'm going to, then the price of whatever the other good is, I'm going to substitute towards it, right? But I also, because the price went up of that other product, I have less total income to split between the two goods, consumption when I'm old and consumption when I'm young. So that effect will both decrease consumption when I'm young because it's larger than the substitution effect, and decrease consumption when I'm old. So the answer to this one is it's going to be point B to point A, and they're going to consume less. And saves, actually no, is he going to save less or is he going to save more? He's going to save more because if consumption when I'm young declines, it means that I'm putting more in the bank account for tomorrow, so my savings is going to increase, okay, to offset the lower interest rate, okay? This doesn't have to be the case that when the price of one good goes up, I consume less of both goods. It just happens to be in this case because the income effect is greater than the substitution effect. Okay. So the answer is D. Any questions about that one? No questions, we'll move on. All right, 30. Which firm is experiencing economies of scale? What does economies of scale means? It means that as I increase production, the average total cost decreases. So in this case, the average total cost here is 200, 200, 200, because I'm getting that from dividing the total cost by the number that they're producing quantity, right? 200, 200. So is firm A experiencing economies of scale? No, they're experiencing constant scale, right? So the cost doesn't change per unit as I increase my quantity. How about here? Here it's 200. Here it's 150. Here it's 400 divided by 3, which is going to be less than 150. 500 divided by 4. 600 divided by 5. Did someone do those calculations?
Yeah,
133. And so this is what's this one? 125 and 1. Okay, so this one is 100, 150, 200, 250, and so you see here that the average total cost is increasing. How about for this one? 175, 220. 81.25. So okay, so we can stop there. This one, the average total cost is increasing. This one, it decreases but then increases. This one, it's decreasing along all quantities. So if we're looking for the best answer here, it would be B, because average total cost is falling everywhere where quantity is increasing. Firm D has economies of scale from 1 to 2, but not from 2 to 3, so that's a worse answer. We have no answer that combines B with D anyway. So economies of scale is such that as quantity is increasing, average total cost is decreasing. So as I produce more, the average cost of production is falling. Okay? And for some of these firms, in the long run, and for some of these firms, it's increasing, but for firm B, it's decreasing everywhere. Okay? Firm D, it's decreasing from 1 to 2, but then increasing from 2 to 3. And for firm A, it's constant. So the only good option is firm B.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For firm C, would it be diseconomies?
This is diseconomies of scale, right? Because as production is increasing, the cost per unit of production is increasing everywhere. So the answer is B. Okay, so 31, we would need to know how much each firm in the market will produce, how many units. So to see how much a firm will produce, we always want to go to the point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue or price in a perfectly competitive setup. And since we have a competitive setup here, we're going to go where marginal cost equals price. Okay? And so we have the total cost equals 60 plus 0.5 times Q squared. We have marginal cost equals Q. We have the market demand of Q equals 100 minus 2P. We also have that the market price is $10. So to know how much each firm will produce, all we have to do is what? We know marginal cost equals Q. We know the price. We plug the price into the marginal cost function, right, to find Q. Okay, so we have marginal cost equals price, $10 equals Q. So Q must equal 10. Okay, that's an easy question. Okay. So the firms always want to cover the next unit of production that they're going to make, right? So that means that for the next unit, how much does it cost me? That has to be equal to whatever I'm going to get in the market for it, right? So in this case, they give us the marginal cost curve. We know that the marginal cost has to be equal to the price because it's a competitive market. And so we have marginal cost equals Q. So marginal cost, so we have the price equals to 10. So we have that's what marginal cost equals, because marginal cost equals 10, which equals Q. So they tell you, right, yeah, because marginal cost equals Q, and marginal cost also equals the price, so you plug the price in for marginal cost, which is equal to Q. The marginal cost in this scenario equals that because it's equal to Q, yes. But more importantly, marginal cost will equal to price regardless of what the function of marginal cost is. We could have had marginal cost equals to Q squared, right? Then we would have Q equals the square root of 10, right? Everyone see that? Because marginal cost would equal Q squared. Then we could plug 10 in for marginal cost. We'd have Q squared equals to 10. And so Q would equal to square root of 10, right? So it's not always the case that marginal cost equals Q. It just does in this case. The important part is that you know that marginal cost equals price in a competitive market. Good question.
So you wouldn't even have to use those.
You wouldn't have to use the other functions in this case. Yeah, right. But so this is the scenario. You'll see the next question also refers to the scenario, and we'll use it then. In the back.
Writing out the MC equals P, right? You had actually erased the MC equals MR equals P. What scenario would you use that again?
So marginal cost. So when you're trying to figure out the quantity for a monopolistic firm, which we'll get to in a few problems, that's when we'll use that. But we'll get to that. Okay. In this case, it's a competitive firm, so all you need to know is they're price takers and marginal cost equals price. The price is the marginal revenue for this firm. Because each unit that they produce, because they're in a competitive market with a lot of firms, a lot of goods are being produced, they produce one extra unit of production, it's going to have no effect on the price. Okay? So here we'll use the other ones. So we have each firm in this market will earn a profit of what? So again, profit equals total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue equals what? Q times P. In the prior problem, we knew that the price was 10, and the quantity produced for each firm is 10, also 10, so that's going to be equal to 100. The total cost we need to get from the total cost curve. So we have total cost equals 60 plus 0.5 times 10 squared. That's going to equal 10 squared is 100. So that's going to, total cost equals 60 plus 0.5 times 100. So total cost equals 110. 60 plus 50 is 110. So we'll get profit equals 100 minus 110 equals negative 10. So the answer is D.
Wait, how do you get total
Total cost comes from this function here. We get 60 plus 0.5 times q squared. From the last problem, we got q equals 10. 10 squared is 100 times 0.5 is 50 plus 60 is 110. Any questions? Okay. So the answer is D.
With these problems, the quantity could be different. We could be using a different quantity depending on if they're asking for competitive versus.
Yes, so when we get to the monopoly question, you'll see how it's a little bit different. It's in, I think it's in the next few questions, actually. The last, yes? Question? No? Okay. So, sorry, the next question is, in the short run, this firm will do what? They'll shut down due to economic losses. They'll continue to produce 10. They'll expand output because price is expected to rise to reduce costs, or they'll cut back on output. So for the first one, to know if they shut down, we have to compare what to what? We have to compare the price to average variable cost, right? We know the price is 10. Where can we get average variable cost? So the fixed cost is going to be 60 because it doesn't change as Q changes. And since we know that total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost, then we can get variable cost from this part of the equation. See, 60 doesn't change as Q changes, so this is 60 plus 0.5 times Q squared. So variable cost is this part of the function, okay? So variable cost equals 0.5 times 10 squared. So variable cost equals 50. Average variable cost equals 50 divided by the quantity, right, produced in the market, which is 10. Remember, to get average variable cost from variable cost, we just divide the variable cost by the quantity produced in the market, which equals 5. If average variable cost is greater than 10, then the market will shut down. But since it's less than 10, we're going to keep our market open. C, expand output because price is expected to rise to reduce losses. We have nothing here to say whether the price will rise or fall. So for now, we're going to, and then B is continue to produce 10 units despite losses. Yes, because we're not shutting down. We're just going to continue to produce where marginal cost equals the price, which is 10 units. We're not going to cut back on output to reduce losses. The reason for that is because if we do that, then marginal cost will be less than the market price, and we'll be able to cut back on our losses by increasing to where the marginal cost equals the price, which is $10. Okay, so we won't want to cut back because then we'll increase our losses even more. We always want to produce where marginal cost equals the price in a competitive market. So the answer is B. All right, so here's the monopoly case. In the monopoly, remember, they face a demand curve. They face a supply curve. But we want to think about this other thing called a marginal revenue curve. The marginal revenue curve is the amount I can earn for each increase in production, the extra amount I'll earn for each increase in production. It falls faster than the demand curve because for each prior unit, right, I also have to decrease the price. We know for this, you should remember this, that the marginal revenue curve will always have the same intercept as the demand curve, but it will have twice the slope. So the slope of this demand curve is 1.5. In a linear demand equation, the marginal revenue will have the same intercept as the demand curve, but twice the slope. So we know that marginal revenue equals 42 minus 3Q. We always want to set marginal cost equal to marginal revenue. We're given marginal cost, so let's do that. So we get 42 minus 3Q equals 2 plus Q. So if we bring this to this side and we bring this to this side, we'll get 40 equals 4Q, or Q equals 10. So that's the amount that we'll produce where the supplier's marginal cost curve intersects the marginal revenue curve. But is that the price that they're going to charge to consumers? No, because why would they do that when they can produce at that amount? But since they're the only firm in the market and they don't have to compete with anyone, they can just capture the whole demand curve and increase price to the where that quantity, this is the quantity where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. They're going to go to this price, okay? So to get that price, we just need to plug this optimal quantity into the demand, back into the demand curve. So we get P equals 42 minus 1.5 times 10. So we get 42 minus 15 equals 27. So the price will be 27. So because this is the only one that has the price equal to 27, we could stop there. But let's also compute profit because they give you profit here. So to get that, we plug total revenue. We go to total cost. Profit equals total cost, or total revenue minus total cost. We can get total revenue from multiplying price by quantity. So 27 times 10 minus total cost. Plug it into this function, right? So we get 2 plus 2 times 10 plus 0.5 times 10 squared. If you do the math, that will come out to 72. So minus 72. So this equals 270 minus 72 equals 198. It matches the profit here, so we know that we did everything right. In the first part, the answer is D. All right. So in this part, the question is, assume government regulations at the Federal Trade Commission break up the monopolists and the market becomes a perfectly competitive market. The price and quantity produced in the competitive market will be what? So how do we do that one? In a competitive market, we're going to have that that the market supply curve is going to equal to the market demand curve, right? But we know that the answer has to lie on the market demand curve, and also that it's going to minimize average total cost in a competitive market. Okay, but so we know that it has to lie on the demand curve. Let's look at each of these questions and see if they lie on the demand curve. That's the easiest way to do this question. So we have that does 24 and 10 lie on the demand curve, so plug 24 in for price. Does that equal 42 minus 1.5 times 10? This is 42 minus 15 equals 27, so that's not right, right? These things are not equal. Plug in B, plug in 18 equals 42 minus 1.5 times 24, which equals 6, so that obviously does not equal 18 and 16. Plug in 18 equals 42 minus 1.5 times 16. That does equal 18, so we're okay here. Then we want to go to this one, see if 20 equals 42 minus 1.5 times 16. That equals 18. So again, no. I'm plugging in the price and the quantity to the demand curve, because we know in a competitive markets equilibrium, the answer has to lie in the demand curve. In fact, it has to intersect the supply curve, right? But so we know it has to be on the demand curve, so I'm plugging in the price and the quantity on both sides of the demand equation and seeing if they're equal. Okay, these are not equal. So again, it's none of these answers. It must be C, because it's the only one that lies on the demand curve. If both of these lied on the demand curve, what would we have to do then? We would have to look at total costs. We would have to get average total cost, which we do by 2 plus 2 times Q. We divide each of these by Q plus 0.5 times Q squared divided by Q. So we would get 2 over Q plus 2 plus 0.5 Q. That would be our average total cost because we divided the total cost curve by Q. And then when we plug in, if like say C and D were both on the demand curve, we would plug in both of their Q's to this equation, the average total cost curve. We know that in a competitive market, it minimizes average total cost, right? So whatever one is smaller, if they're both on the demand curve, would be the right answer, okay?
In a perfectly competitive market, price is equal to marginal cost, right?
Yes. So this is the each firm's marginal cost. This is not the market's supply curve. So did you get the same answer when you said? Okay. So let's try doing that because that might be an easier way. 42 minus 1.5 Q equals 2 plus Q. Put this on this side. We get 40 on this side. We get 2.5 Q on this side. So we divide 40 by 2.5. Presumably you got 16, right? Q equals 16. And then you plug that back into the demand curve to get the price, right? So that's the other way to do it. So that I showed you a longer way to do it. The other way to do it would set marginal cost equal to demand, since all firms are identical here.
So answer is C, right?
The answer is C, yes. So what's the deadweight loss in this market? So to calculate deadweight loss, it helps to draw the graph. We have demand. We have the marginal cost curve. We have, in the uncompetitive case, they're going to go to marginal revenue. They're going to mark up the price to the demand curve at 27. We got that from the question 34. We know that if we plugged in 10, the optimal quantity to the marginal cost curve, we would get 12. Okay. And so the deadweight lost is going to be the difference between the price in the non-competitive case and the markup price, the marginal cost in the markup price minus the marginal cost in the uncompetitive case, or 27 minus 12. And then to get the height of this triangle, we're going to take the equilibrium at 16 minus 10. Oh, so I got 12. That's the place where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Plug in 10 to Q. 10 plus 2 is 12. 10 is the optimal quantity when we're in a monopoly, in a monopolistic case. So,
Where is the given though? From previous question?
yeah, from the previous question. You would have seen in the previous question when you solved it in 34 that the optimal quantity for monopoly is 10. And then 16 is the competitive quantity, right? So, so this is the marginal cost in the monopoly case. This is the price that they charge everyone. So we're going to take 27 minus 12 times 16 minus 10, the height of the triangle, divided by 2, because it's a triangle. If you do the math, you're going to get 90 divided by 2 equals 45. So the answer in this case would be 45. The 16 came from the previous question where we solved that the optimal quantity in perfect competition would have been 16, or where the marginal cost equals the demand curve.
But if we got the 16, why don't we take the price that's equal?
Why don't we take the price that's what?
We're taking the quantity of how do we figure out, why do we have to recalculate the 12?
The 12, because the deadweight loss is the difference between the markup price and marginal cost curve at that quantity times the height. Does that make sense?
Yeah, now I understand.
Okay. Any other questions? So we get 45 by calculating that triangle. This question is like a gimme question. If you read the book, you should absolutely get this correct. If you were in class like the day that they went over it, you should absolutely get this one correct. A public good is a what? It's non-rival and not excludable. It's non-rival because my consumption of that good doesn't affect anyone else's consumption of the good. So what's an example of a good that is rival? Well, the roads, for example, if we all take the roads at the same time, then there's going to be a traffic jam, and so my consumption affects your consumption, right? It's non-excludable because they're public roads and everyone can take the roads, but it's not non-rival because my consumption affects your consumption of the good. Okay, so that would not be an example of a perfect public good. What's an example of something that's non-excludable? Well, if I make if a violinist player is playing outside of Times Square, then that's going to be a non-excludable good, right? Anyone can come to Times Square and listen. It might still be rival, right? An example of a non-rival good would be what? What would be a good example of a non-rival good?
Public Wi-Fi.
So public Wi-Fi, as long as the Wi-Fi bandwidth is so large that my consumption doesn't affect your consumption, let's say it's much larger than anyone could ever use, then my consumption of it won't affect your consumption of it. So this is just the definition question. You should know it. Answer is A. Another definition question. The law of diminishing marginal returns implies that with the use of capital fixed, as the quantity of labor rises, what happens? So if capital is fixed, let's say we're talking about let's say we're talking the good being produced is Big Macs, right? And we're going to fix the capital, meaning we're just going to keep all of the we're going to have just one McDonald's, let's say, in this market. We're going to fix the number of McDonald's to 1, and we're only going to change the labor. When I add my first person, that might increase my product of labor. In other words, that person might be able to produce 3 burgers by themselves. If you increase it to 2 workers, they might be able to create 6 burgers, or let's say like 8 burgers, because they can work in tandem. But if you keep increasing the amount of people that are working at McDonald's to 40 to 60 to 80, right? Then you're going to run out of room, space in the area, so each extra person is not going to add that many more Big Macs production to the McDonald's, right? And so as you increase labor and keep the amount of area or the amount of equipment that they're using fixed, then that means that the marginal product of labor, or the product I get from each additional unit of labor, is going to decline, right? So maybe the 60th worker only produces 0.5 Big Macs, whereas the second worker produced 6 Big Macs. So as you increase labor and keep capital fixed, the marginal product of labor will fall. So the answer is A. In the long run, we would expect the price of a firm's good to be what in this case? So we know that the price in the long run of a competitive market is going to go where? It's going to go where the average total cost is minimized, or where the marginal cost curve crosses the average total cost curve, right? Which will also be the place where it crosses the marginal revenue curve. Okay, and so the price will go down to 20 in this case. They could have actually given you 20 as an answer, and you should have been able to do this, but they were generous, and they gave you ranges. It's not, the price isn't going to stay at 30, because what's true about a market where the price is 30? In other words, their total revenue is greater than their total cost. What's true about these markets? They're earning a profit, right? If they're earning a profit, what's going to happen? More firms are going to want to get into the market to capture some of that profit, and the price is going to come down the price is going to come down, the price is going to come down until we're at this minimum point where average total cost equals marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And because the companies will be earning zero profit at that point, which means no one has an incentive to get into the market. No one also has incentive to get out of the market, because remember, total cost includes opportunity cost. And so there's no one that doing something else could be making more in the market. Go ahead. In the long run, if firms enter the market, then the markup will go away. Yes. This is monopolistic competition. Yeah. So this is a monopolistic competition question. It might, if this were a competitive market, it would go to 20. If it was a monopolistic competition question, then it would have some markup because the demand curve would keep sliding down. But it would definitely be less than 30. Okay.
Where marginal costs intersect both like average total cost and marginal revenue?
Yes. So it has to be less than 30 because the firms will be attracted into the market by the profit that other firm is earning. Okay. So firms on average are earning money, so they'll be attracted into the market by the profit. So it has to be below 30, and that's the only question that. Yeah.
It's not noted prior to the graph. How do we know that it is a monopolistic market? Competitive.
Let me make
It
sure.
doesn't note it. Yes. So just by looking at the graph.
So this doesn't show that. It doesn't show that in the graph, but you can assume if they don't say anything, it's either perfect competition or it's monopolistic competition. Okay, it's monopolistic competition because the demand curve is falling, right? In a perfectly competitive market, the demand curve would be fixed, right? Because the demand curve that each firm faces would just be the price in the market, because they have no ability to alter the price in the market. It's monopolistic competition because the demand curve is falling. Okay.
And not a monopoly because the price?
And not a monopoly. In the long run, we would expect the price of the firm's good to be falling. If it was a monopoly, they would go to the point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue and mark up the price. But in this case, we can assume that it's, this actually is I think that they might have added a disclaimer on the last final that this was referring to monopolistic competition, because you're right, if it was a monopoly, then the price actually could be $30. Okay, so this I think should have had a disclaimer next to it that it was a monopolistic competition. Okay.
Thank you.
Final question. So this is explicit that we're referring to monopolistic competition, and it asks which of these graphs depicts a short-run equilibrium that will encourage the entry of other firms into a monopolistically competitive industry. So if it's going to attract people into the industry, that means that the price has to be higher than average total cost or lower than average total cost? Higher, right? So in a monopolistic competition sense, they'll go to the place where marginal cost equals marginal revenue and then mark up the price to here, right? Since it equals average total cost, they're earning zero economic profit, so no one will be attracted into the market. Let's see, B, average total cost is higher than the markup price, so they're earning a loss. So they're getting a loss, so no one's going to be attracted into a market where the firm in the market is earning a loss. C, we see that the price markup is above average total cost, so firms will be attracted into the market in this case. Finally, D, we also have a case where the average total cost is below the markup price, but the problem here is that this is not monopolistic competition because they're price takers, so we can eliminate D. The answer is B, or panel C.